Hello crafty friends, welcome to day 7 of Die Cut December 2024 and this 10 ways to stretch your dies video. Dies are great tools. They give you loads of flexibility in your crafting. They're quite expensive though, or they can be. So it's great if we can use them for more than the obvious. And today I'm going to share 10 ways in which I stretch my dies. 10 ways that I use them for more than just cutting out a simple die cut and sticking it on a card. For technique number 1, we're going to do some DIY aperture dies. So this is an aperture die, sometimes called a peekaboo die or a window die, and it cuts holes in panels or card fronts that you can see through and put something pretty behind. But you don't have to have aperture dies to get an aperture look. I've got these heart confetti dies. So the idea with these is that you use them to cut out little hearts, which you can stick on your project or use literally as confetti or put them in shakers. But I'm going to use them to make apertures in my card panel. So I've got a stitched rectangle panel here and a T-square ruler. I think actually I'm going to do this landscape. And we could have them in the top left corner again. And I'll use my T-square ruler to line them up where I want them. So I've got small, medium and large. You could use individual dies for this. And then carefully I'm going to put a sticky note on to keep them in place. I hope I haven't shifted them. And I'll run that through my Cuttlebug. You might want to put some scrap paper in your sandwich just to protect the front of your card from any scratches or dents or divots in your cutting plates. So I think that's cut through nicely. I can carefully remove my post-it. Post-its are nice and thin bits of paper, so they don't tend to leave a mark once they've been through the die cutting machine. Now I've got some heart apertures, and again I can put some paper behind that and that can peek through. So our first way of stretching your dies is to create your own aperture dies from the dies that you have. And you can always use the bits you cut out for something else. We've got some white hearts here that we could colour or leave as they are and use them maybe for some faux embossing or to put in a shaker card. Our second way to stretch our dies is to not simply cut one layer die cuts. We can create our own DIY chipboard by layering up die cuts. I've used this speech bubble die to cut out 4 white speech bubbles and 1 colourful speech bubble. I can put some glue on my mat and spread it out and then dip into my glue. So that's 2 layers thick now. That's 4 layers thick now. So if you use a wet glue for this, you've got a little bit of wiggle time to get everything lined up properly. And you can do this with fiddly die cuts as well. Now I want to put my colourful die cut on top, but I'm going to dip the white or the bottom die cuts. You could use different colour card for this. In there, get the glue on that and then put the top die cut on. So if I did it like that, dip that in there, I run the risk of getting glue on the top, but if I put the glue on the underneath part, then the top should theoretically stay clean. And now I've got a 5-layer die cut there. And that's a very easy way of stretching your dies to create your own thick chipboard die cuts. Technique number 2 leads us nicely on to technique number 3, which is using your dies to create DIY embossing. So I've got 3 octagons here that I've die cut and I've layered 3 die cuts on each. So we've got a nice thick chipboard-esque die cut. And now I'm going to place these, let's start at the top I think, place these on my card panel. If you use glue for these, you want to make sure the glue has had a chance to dry, because when you run these through your die cutting machine, if the glue hasn't dried, it might squirt out the side of your layered pieces. I've got my thick bottom plate, a cutting plate, a rubber mat with that face side up, and then another cutting plate. Now I can take that off, and it's embossed, I hope you can see that, the octagons into the paper. It'll have come up on the other side, so I've got the embossed and the debossed or indented, so whichever side you want on your front, you just have to put your card the right way up. As well as using die cuts to actually emboss on some card, you can use die cuts to faux emboss on some card. So I've stuck this card to a bit of double-sided sticky, and I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. I'll take the sticky backs off of these and then stick them to my card panel. So because I've used the same card for the die cuts as the background, it looks almost as if it's been created with an embossing folder. If you want a more pronounced look, you could stack die cuts, make your own DIY chipboard, so you could do 2 or 3, and you can leave them white like that. They look quite elegant, and you can ink them exactly the same way that you would with a properly embossed image, because they'll catch the ink in the same way. So that's a bit of faux embossing with dies. You can actually emboss with dies themselves. So I've got a piece of smooth white cardstock there. I've got a die with multiple different size flowers. I'm going to place that on there like that. And that's going on my rubber embossing mat. And that has embossed the pattern on there. So again, you've got an embossed side and a debossed side. You could run it through the other way up, so instead of the cutting side down, put the cutting side up. You might find it helpful to spritz your paper with a little bit of water when doing this so you don't get cracking. So with the same die, just using it the other way up, you get a slightly different look. Right, we're going to do a DIY letterpress technique here, and I'm inking up the back of this die. It's a solid die, and I've put Versamark sticky ink on it, and now I'm going to put Distress Oxide on. And the reason that I used the Versamark is that it helps the Distress Oxide stick to the metal. And now I'm going to put a bit of card on my rubber mat. Carefully pick up my die and place it where I want it. You only get one go at this. And now I'll run that through my Cuttlebug. And now that has pressed the heart into the card. So there's the embossed side. So this is the debossed or indented side, but it's also pressed the coloured ink down onto the card. And I'm going to do the same thing with this snowflake die. It's kind of solid on the back. You could, if you wanted, just do this and then heat emboss, and I think that's what I'm going to do. So we'll treat that with talcum powder, get that inked up again in case I wiped it off accidentally. Place that inky side down, and now we've got a debossed snowflake that has got embossing ink in it. I'm going to shake over some superfine silver embossing powder, and now I'll heat that with my heat tool. So there's my silver snowflake shape, and I've used the same die to die cut a white snowflake out of card, and I could stick that on top of there like that. In a similar way to creating our own DIY chipboard, we can make DIY thickers. Now, thickers are an American crafts brand of foam-backed letters, numbers, words, icons, that kind of thing. But we can do that ourselves. So I've got a bit of background here from my box of backgrounds and bits. It's a bit bonkers. I'm going to use it to create some thickers. So I've got the word hello, I've got a bow, and I've got the letters high. You can also do numbers, whatever you fancy. When you're putting dies from different manufacturers through a die cutting machine at the same time, spread them out a bit, because there'll probably be slightly different thicknesses, and if you butt them up against each other, they're not going to cut properly, because the machine won't be able to apply the same amount of pressure to all of them in one pass. So I've got my bit of coloured paper, and this is Sticks 2 double-sided adhesive foam. It's only about 1 millimetre or 2 thick, so it's not too thick, but it does provide a nice little bit of lift. So I'll stick that on and cut that out, and I'll pop those back on there, make sure they're all fitting, and die cut. Now I can very carefully remove my dies. Sometimes it doesn't cut all the way through the backing, but it does cut the foam and the paper or card. So I can get my bow out of here. If the backing has stayed on, you can always store them, so you can pre-prepare these. Take the backing off, pop it on a bit of card, and there you go, a DIY thicker. Same with the letters and words. If you haven't got your own adhesive foam, you can always take regular foam and add tape to it yourself. Double-sided tape, I mean. Right, this is very sticky, this foam, and I don't want to stretch this word. You can curve things, so this is supposed to go in a straight line, this word, but I'm going to curve it around just to show that you can. And there you go, DIY thickers. On to technique number 6 now, and that is DIY enamel dots. So I've got this cover plate die that cuts a range of size circles. This little one also does, it's got some quite big circles as well. This one cuts 2 different sizes of sequin die. This one cuts some very small circles, and these 3 cut wobbly circles. And I use these to make my own DIY enamel dots and sequins. So I've got this little tin here, and in it I've got some little pots. This is my gold glitter cardstock pot. I think I used this die to cut these. And I've got just gold foil. These ones are the really big ones from here, and everything else is in there, apart from some little teeny tiny ones that I used that die for. I've got silver glitter, I've got copper glitter, I've got black glitter, got some red ones from, I think it was yesterday's video, the Christmas card video. You can colour card or use pattern paper and die cut your own enamel dots. Let's take the copper glitter. All I want to do is add a little bit of glue to my mat. Dip them into the glue. Place them like that. If glue's squirted out the side, I might just dab them like that with a damp baby wipe. And then I'll take some Nouveau Crystal Glaze or some glossy accents and add some to the top, making sure to get right to the edge, but hopefully not spilling over the edge. And that will dry clear, and when it does, you get a domed, dimensional, glossy, glittery dot, or whatever colour that you've created it from. So DIY enamel dots. I love these because you can match them exactly to the rest of your card or project. And it's much cheaper in the long run, I think, because this die, which is my main enamel dot die, cost me £7, I think, which is only slightly more than a pack of enamel dots here in the UK. And I can make infinite numbers of enamel dots with this, so it's paid for itself over and over and over. And you only use a tiny little bit of glossy accents or crystal glaze, so again, it's not an expensive way to make your own enamel dots. Technique number 7 is to use nesting shape dies, such as these circle dies, to create your own frames. So take 2 sizes and line them up as best you can so there's an equal size gap all the way around. I find these post-its are great. They've got 80% coverage, so they're sticky over this bit, and this is the only bit that's not sticky. So these are great for holding this down, but you can use washi tape. And then take a piece of card, the card you want to create your frame from, and run that through your die cutting machine. So you get a circle from the middle one, or whatever shape you've used, and then you get a frame from between the two dies. And because this is a stitch die, the frame has some stitching on as well. So as I say, any nesting dies, you could use squares, rectangles, hexagons. I've got nesting postage stamp dies. You can create your own frames. Technique number 8 is to use dies to create your own stamps. I've die cut a postage stamp shape out of some white fun foam. Doesn't have to be white, can be any colour. I'll put a bit of stick glue on the back and put it on an acrylic block. You could do the same with a stamp positioner. This is Catherine Pooler Pixie Dust. To ink that up and carefully press it on here. Give it a few seconds to transfer and a good even pressure. And there you go, a postage stamp with some stitching detail made from foam. You can buy textured foam. This is a sort of corrugated texture. So I'll die cut from that. So I'll stick that onto my block again, and I will swipe on some ink. And now I've got a textured stamped image. So I've just cut a rectangle roughly from my foam, and I'm going to put it in an embossing folder. Run it through your die cutting machine with your embossing sandwich. So now I've got a bit of foam with an embossed texture on it. It's not very deep on this particular one. It all depends on how thick your foam is and how deep the indentations are on your embossing folder. But hopefully we'll get some texture out of it. And we have. So you can use your fun foam and your dies to create DIY stamps, and you can add texture to your die cut foam using embossing folders or other embossing tools. You can also use your dies to create stamps using stamping foam. So with this stamping foam, you heat it up with your heat tool, press your die into it to get a pattern, and then you can ink it up and stamp with it. So that's what I'm going to do. It can be helpful to stick your stamping foam block to an acrylic block. It just helps with pressure. So I'm going to heat this up and see if we can get this die imprinted in here for stamping. And there you go, the pattern is imprinted in there, and I can add ink to this. It can be helpful to give it a very fine mist of water, and then I can stamp. And there we have a stamp made with dye. You can clean these off with water or a cloth or a baby wipe. And then you can heat the block again to get rid of the pattern and start all over with a different die. I'm going to do that again, but with this sort of cover plate type die. And then we have a fantastic pattern on there. You could use both sides of the die, so that would give you a different look. And that's different again. So stretch your dies by using them to create stamps with fun foam or stamping foam. As well as DIY stamps, you can create DIY stencils with your die. So I'm going to use this aperture die, and I'm going to die cut from this piece of acetate. And I'll do it in the middle, I think. Just hold it in place with a sticky note. You don't have to use fancy acetate. You can use bits of leftover packaging. You could use scrap card. If you want something permanent, then use maybe a plastic. You can get stencil material, acetate, packaging. If you are not bothered about it being reusable, then just use scrap card. So there we go. I managed to mangle it a bit there, but as you can see, you've got that aperture in some acetate. And now you can take a brush with ink on it or a sponge dauber or something and use it as a stencil. Right, we are now on to our final technique, and that is to make your own DIY elements. And by that I mean take a die that is one thing and use it to make something completely different that you can put in your cards. So first we've got a simple rectangle die being used to make 3 candles from blended cardstock, and then a leaf die being used to cut some gold foiled leaves which I've turned into flames for my candles. I've shown this sort of idea in quite a few of my videos now, but it is a fun technique and it's a great one if you're in a rush for a card. You can just take some patterned paper or paper from your box of backgrounds and die cut some candles from it. If you want to jazz up your candles a bit, you can stamp on them, stencil on them, run them through your die cutting machine with an embossing folder. The world's your oyster, really. Similarly, I used this die to cut some cake layers. So I took a piece of card that I previously ran through an embossing folder with pink ink and white shimmer spray. I die cut some rectangles and shortened 2 of them for the upper layers of the cake. Then I stuck them down on the card and just doodled on some small candles. Another fairly obvious one is to take a humble square die and die cut a present. That's exactly what I've done here. I just wrapped some gold thread around this blue and gold square, added a little tied knot at the top with glue, and you got a present. Now I've got a green circle here, and I'm going to die cut using the same circle die I used to make it. And I'm just going to take a little bit off the side. And now I've got a leaf shape and a moon shape, and I can create different phases of the moon by chopping different amounts off. And now I've got a skinny moon. So you can slice into your die cuts with other dies to create new things. With this circle die, I made a balloon. All I did was die cut out a white circle, blended on some purple ink, heavier down here, lighter up here to give that dimension and shine. And then I die cut a little knot. No, I didn't die cut it, I scissor cut a little knot from some more purple card and drew on a bow and string. And there you have a DIY balloon. I often use circle dies to create baubles for my Christmas card because I love baubles. So I die cut this circle from some blue and gold embossed card that I made. But one of the members of my Facebook group shared a card she'd made where she'd used a tag die to die cut a tag and then use it as the top of the little cap for your bauble where the string goes. So that's what I've done with this. I used this die to die cut out some gold glitter card and I stuck it on the back of the bauble, and now I can stick that on my card. I could put some thread through there, or I could just draw a string, add a little bit of glue to the back of the tip there and hold it there till it sticks. And I just thought that was a real genius idea. Finally, I used this heart die and this circle to create my own DIY flower element. So I stuck this gold glitter circle down to my card blank using a little bit of foam tape to create a little gap. And then I dipped some blue and gold die cut hearts in glue and then stuck them under all the way around to create this flower. And I doodled on a stem and a leaf. If you like this idea of making things with dies that they weren't necessarily intended to be used for, then check out my More Bang for Your Buck series. I did a whole load of things with circle dies. I did rainbows and watermelons and vinyl records and all sorts. So do check that out if you want to see some more ideas. Right, I hope you found this video helpful and it's given you some ideas of ways that you can stretch the dies that you have in your stash and get more for your money when it comes to your dies. If you have found the video helpful, please let me know in the comments, leave a thumbs up, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for day 8 of Die Cut December. Thanks for watching, bye for now.